I'd like to welcome everybody. I'm Andy Caldwell. I'm running for Congress, and we're doing a school live stream video town hall meeting here. And we're going to be covering several different issues as it pertains to the status of our school situation, now our education situation, in regard to, for instance, the COVID closures, the incident rate as far as it affects kids catching COVID by being with one another and all that. But also we're going to talk about some other issues that are very, very hot topics here on the Central Coast, including in Santa Barbara. The Santa Barbara School Board has been under a siege, so to speak, from concerned parents, having to do with two different things. One of them is called implicit bias training, and the other one is sex education. So I've got a group of friends here with me that are going to be telling us different aspects and sharing their knowledge, professional knowledge on issues. And I want to introduce them just real briefly, and we'll get more information from them as we proceed. Mark McKinney has got a master's in divinity from Princeton Theological Seminary. He's a sex addiction therapist here on the Central Coast. And we're going to be talking about the relationship between school sex ed programs, the hookup culture and all that, and what's happening to our youth. Brad Dacus is the president of Pacific Justice Institute. This is a premier public interest law firm. And what he does is he represents families and churches and also educates the community about various issues relating to education and people's rights. Elrod McLearn is somebody I just met. He's running for school board in Santa Barbara. He has a phenomenal personal story that ties in everything that we're going to be talking about today. So to begin with, before I actually begin, I want to let you know that if you are watching on Facebook, you can submit comments or questions. And if you're on YouTube, you can do the same via chat button. So I'm going to just introduce and kick off this matter real briefly by showing you a couple of slides here or screenshots. And the first one I want to show you is this has to do with that we did not need to shut down our schools. This is the CDC chart, Center for Disease Control. And if you'll see here, this is rates of hospitalization. And when we talk about COVID, there's some people that just seemingly don't catch it. There's some people that catch it, but they're asymptomatic, which means they have no symptoms. Then there's people with mild symptoms, and all of those categories, that is the beginning or the hope of herd immunity. But there are people that get seriously ill, requiring hospitalization. There's some that require the ICU. And then unfortunately, we know that this disease can be deadly. However, the risk that's presented to the different age cohorts is not the same. And as you can see down here where it says age group, K through 12 or 5-year-old to 17-year-olds are the least likely to be hospitalized, i.e. the least likely to become seriously ill as a result of if they catch COVID. And this is true to this day. Most of the people that get it are older. Along those lines, I'm going to share something else here with you. This is from the American Academy of Pediatrics. The American Academy of Pediatrics, there in the box, indicates that strongly advocates that all policy considerations for the coming school year should start with the goal of having students physically present at school. And one of the reasons for this is that they know that a number of kids, upwards of 20% of kids, they don't have either a computer, laptop at the home, or they don't have internet connection. 1 out of 5. So distance learning, if they can't afford a laptop, computer, or internet, 1 out of 5 students are not going to be in school at all. And in fact, the LA Unified School District lost track of 60,000 students back in March when they went to distance learning. 60,000 students were gone. They don't know what happened to them. They could not reach them. And then I want to share one other thing with you, and then we're going to get to our guests. This is a map. CNN provided this. It comes from the Education Week's maps. And what this is a kind of funky little map of the United States. There's Alaska, here's Puerto Rico, Florida, and Hawaii. And you'll see it's color coded. So the bulk of the states, almost all of them, they allow local school districts and health authorities to determine whether the school is reopened, how it's reopened, and what the conditions are. There's some states that, like Texas, Florida, Arizona, or no, that's not Arizona, that's probably Arkansas, and Iowa have mandated the schools reopen. They're just flat out reopen. They don't have a choice. And then there's some that the blue North Carolina and Delaware only hybrid or remote instructions. And so ours, we here in California, we're state ordered closure in effect. However, schools can apply for a waiver. And this is by big grievance. In our region, 95% of the schools that have applied for a waiver are all private schools. The public schools are not applying for the waivers. We believe one of the reasons for that is A, they get paid whether they're open or not, unlike private schools. And secondly, we think the unions have been balking at reopening schools. Regardless, you've got the poor kids that can't afford a laptop or internet connection. And then you got the poor kids that can't afford to go to private school. So we've got a huge problem in our hands. And the one exception for all of this is in Santa Barbara and in few other places. If you're a public school employee, your kid can at least go to the public school to hook up and do your work there so that their parents can go back to work. So that's the background of where we're at. I'm going to go to Brad Dacus first. And Brad, one of the things the law provides is equal protection under the law, but we've got unequal access to school, and school's typically is considered a civil right. Some kids can't afford private school, some kids can't distance learn at home. How are they getting away with this?
Yeah, it's very problematic, and it's also very discriminatory. First off, we have the fact that government public schools, in and of themselves, have a gross disparity. The urban inner city schools are greatly deficient in quality, competent education of children. So these kids already have the short end of the stick compared to some of the nicer school districts in the state, like Clovis and others. But then we also, when we combine that with the fact, as you said before, there's a huge deficiency in terms of the number of students who have the opportunity to have online, or you have school districts that are not stepping up to providing what's called educational day camps and encouraging that. That's also very problematic as well. But that's not the end of it. It's, the K through 6th grade can seek waivers. 7th through 12th, they can have educational day camps. There's a lot of pressure on private schools right now. Parents who say, well, I'll put my child in a charter school. Well, guess what? Governor Gavin Newsom of California has completely shut off any new students being able to go into charter schools. Why? That's illogical. They should be able to do that. And there is no logical reason except he's placating to the teachers union at the expense of these children who need an educational alternative. It's very problematic. I know one thing that that we're doing right now at Pacific Justice Institute, Andy, I know you appreciate this, is we're empowering and equipping churches and synagogues to start homeschool cooperative groups at their church or synagogue, so that parents can work together. And especially if two parents work, for example, you still got a kid here, they don't want their kid to not get education at all. They work together with other parents who can homeschool collectively. They meet at the church or the synagogue. These are popping up across the country, particularly in hostile states like California to parents' rights. This is something major, but in the long term, we really need something like school choice and vouchers. I know, Andy, as a candidate for Congress, that's something you've been very outspoken on. We will not have equality in education and equality of opportunity until we have school choice and the ability for parents to make that decision. You get that, President Trump gets that. I hope the voters get that this coming election.
Absolutely. So I want to introduce Elrod again. Elrod McLaren is running for school board. He has a phenomenal story, including taking care of his siblings, younger siblings, with regard to quote unquote school choice. Elrod, welcome to the town hall.
Thank you, Andy. Yeah, I briefly wanted to mention what Brad was talking about. Here in Santa Barbara Unified District, the only schools that have applied for the waivers, K through 6 schools that have applied for a waiver, have been private schools. The district has not applied for any waiver, not for their elementary school. Even in the more conservative parts of the county, up north, there's a lot more conservatives and Republicans up there, and they tend to be a little bit more, less concerned about the COVID and things. They haven't even applied for waivers in their districts. So it is more so of a school choice issue. And relating to my own personal story, like you were talking about, Andy, I'm the third oldest of 11 children. And when I was about 18 years old, my parents separated and been divorced. And that caused no male figure to be in our family because my dad went to live somewhere else. My mom took some of my younger siblings with her. And in doing that, we didn't have any money for private school. We did for a year, a private school, a Christian private school, gave us some scholarships, and we were like, awesome. After the end of that year, they said, hey, we don't have any more funds for you guys. So my siblings then went into public school. And this has a lot to do with school choice and being able to get some vouchers and monies and things to go where we would like to go. But we went there to public school and their proficiency dropped, their mathematical ability dropped. There was a lot of bad things that came out from that. And so because of it, what I did is I started working and the graveyard shift. We pulled them out of school. I started teaching him, homeschooling him. And after about a year or so, they got back to the level that they were at from going to that private school. And so school choice is really critical. And not everyone has the opportunity to, switch jobs, change up their schedule to provide that education for their children. So yeah, I am a big proponent of school choice. Also, I would say that parents being involved in their child's education is also critical. And if we give parents that ability to be more involved, they're going to get engaged. So that's why I'm running. And I think thirdly, I would say that I plan to have kids of my own. And a lot of people tell me, oh, you're only 27. Why are you concerned about education? Well, I think one, I'm going to have children of my own, and I want them to get a good education. Secondly, working day in and day out and having to go back home and educate my own siblings because the system had failed them really galvanized me to want to do something and to affect change. I don't want anyone else to experience what my family went through, and also very quickly, and I think we're going to get to this a little bit and further on, but that whole idea of you're a minority, so you're oppressed, is what they were just pumping into the school system. And some of my siblings actually started to believe those kind of things and were negatively affected because of that. I luckily was told that I have a responsibility via my own personal integrity to go make something of myself. And I grabbed hold of that and I took it and I ran. And so, as we can see for myself, other people like Ben Carson or anyone else who's been successful, regardless of their color, it was their own individual personal responsibility. And that's also something they're really pushing with this ethnic studies in the school here in Santa Barbara district. They're promoting Black Lives Matter. They're promoting this racial critical race theory. And they're also just keeping down the minority students with this. So for all those reasons, I'm running and I hope to change those things and provide a better opportunity for other minority students and also everyone in the district as a whole.
Great. So as Brad mentioned, I've been a school choice proponent for decades. And you know, some of our local schools were pretty good and they still are fairly well good, but some of these state mandates coming down that we're going to be talking about more are literally corrupting our kids. So, you know, one of the things I've promised people to do, school choice is one of my top priorities. I will be introducing a bill. It'll be done I hope within days of me going back to Washington, D.C. I don't think it should take more than a month or two to get that going. Because here's the deal, Elrod, and your family, when we talked on the radio, you mentioned the fact that your family had all the indices that would have set you up for failure. Parents divorced, on welfare, family members in prison and jail, you know, some people with gang involvement. You should have just been another statistic in the school to prison pipeline. And my main point here today is part of the school to prison pipeline is that our schools are broken. And they've never been as broken as they are right now due to COVID. And, you know, Brad, what I keep going back to is if the disease is the same from district to district and state to state, how can we have 1,000 or 2,000 different approaches to education when it's the same virus?
Yeah, this is not a medical or biological or statistical basis. This is a political basis for this kind of differentiation. It's no wonder if people look at those states that are the most restrictive, all have Democrat governors. And for example, and their goal and agenda is basically to keep things suppressed until after the election. They want to keep the economy suppressed. They're hoping that Biden will get elected if they keep the economy suppressed, and then Biden will release hundreds of billions of dollars to bail out the liberal states that have major deficits because of their major fiscal issues and problems. So that's really the bottom line to all this. That said, moving forward, we still have to argue what the facts are and the statistics. I think it's very compelling. There's absolutely no reason, whether you're talking about, as you mentioned, the American Association or the pediatrics, I think is what was mentioned, and also the CDC, all of them say, open up the schools. You're hurting children. Depression is up. Suicides are up significantly among youth, particularly among adolescents. There's a huge need for education and for students to have the opportunity for a quality education, which comes through school choice. Moving forward, I would like to touch, if I can, Andy, also about some of the specific problems that we're seeing now that make school choice even more compelling for the average parent. One is there's a new sex ed curriculum, as you mentioned earlier, that's come out. It's under the California Health Youth Act. It's mandated in every single public school in California, all of them, all the way down to kindergarten level. It's a very radical sexuality, sexual identity program. It's so graphic that most parents would be shocked. The sexual activities that it advocates under the idea of not getting someone pregnant is repugnant. It's outrageous. And so we at Pacific Justice produced a documentary on this. It's 45 minutes long. It's called Sex Ed, SEXXX Ed. Let parents decide. They can go to our website, pji.org, and they can link up and download that, and they can send that out. Parents need to know the garbage. This video, by the way, is mature audiences only, MA. It's not even, it's above R. It's that graphic, but it's exactly the same material kids are being exposed to and need to have their eyes opened up. In addition to that, what makes this even more compelling is we found out that the elementary school level, for PE, we found out that the kids, and this is a Bakersfield school district that I found this out, Panama, Buena Vista, and West Bakersfield. First graders, second graders, every day they have to sign up for PE class, and they ask them questions about how they're feeling, their emotions, how things are going. This is opening the door for Child Protective Services to have pretext to take children. We always said there's a huge abuse of that in California, lack of due process. But they opened the PE class begins with the teacher going like this and leading them in a Buddhist yoga. I say Buddhist because she begins it with the Buddhist prayer expression like this every day. It's called the Sonic Hedgehog. Sonic Hedgehog, it's for children. This has no place. We just found out about this last week. And this is going through our public schools right now as we speak. And then we've got the new, it's already radical enough. We have radical, a bill that's going to put forth this new radical racial kind of a sociology thing, very radical. It's supposed to make some kids feel guilty and sorry for nothing that they did. Other kids feeling, create feelings of anger or even, hatred or entitlement. It's very destructive. It's divisive. It's unhealthy. And then we have the 1609 program that's being pushed. President Trump has come out against that, but this is what's want to be pushed in all our public schools regarding rewriting history and in a very distorted, unrealistic way. So this is very important, and these are just reasons, in addition to what's going on, why parents need to be encouraged to pull their kids out of public schools, start homeschool groups if they can. But in the long term, we've got to get behind school choice. The president is behind it stronger than any president in my lifetime. And I know you as a congressman, Andy, will be a strong advocate, non-milquetoast advocate for the parents and parents' rights for school choice.
Thank you for that. Let me just say something real quick. Folks, again, if you are on Facebook, you can send in a comment or a question. YouTube, you can do it via chat. We're going to get to your questions in just a moment. I just want to tell you real briefly my story. Both my wife and I went to public schools. My wife was a public school teacher. We had kids. Our oldest kid was born with severe asthma and allergies, and the anaphylactic shock level type allergies. And we were told that the #1 cause of death of young kids is they were in public school. Some kids shared something they're not allowed to eat. And the schools no longer had nurses. They would no longer administer the Epi Junior shot, and the kid's dead by the time the ambulance gets there. So my wife and I decided we're going to just homeschool. We didn't have much money to homeschool and for her not to work. But anyway, we did. And then she just ended up loving it. We found out that kids got a better education. All of my girls that have finished college graduated either cum laude or summa cum laude. They all did very, very well. And anyway, so I've been an advocate for this for a long time. And like I said, in my first 100 days, I'm going to introduce a bill similar to Senator Tim Scott on this subject. But I want to bring something up. I heard this last week on the radio show. And, it's good the radio show room's walls are padded because I'm banging my head against those walls quite often. So parents, for the most part, they can, in some cases, they can pull a kid out of sex ed, okay? But they normally don't get to read the material, see the material, and then sign a consent for their kid to go. But what was happening is because of distance learning, some parents were sitting in watching their kids' sex ed class, and they were absolutely astounded and offended. They weighed in either right there at the moment, or they called the principal and the teacher. So guess what? The district required the parent to sign a consent form or get the consent of the district to be able to watch, not for their kid to be in it, but they had to get sign a thing that they would, if they watched it, they wouldn't share it, they wouldn't do screenshots of it, et cetera, et cetera. The consent form's going the other way. I wanted to bring in Mark McKinney. Mark, thank you for being with us. You're not muted. I think your computer's muted there.
Yeah.
So Mark, I met you a couple of years ago. You have an absolute phenomenal sex addiction therapy practice in the 5 cities area. And you are seeing the results of addiction to pornography, but we're also seeing it that children as young as 12 years old are clinically diagnosed as sex addicts. I don't think these school programs are helping, and I'd like to get your perspective on all this.
Yeah, thank you, Andy. I agree with Brad, and Elrod, I love your story, respect your story, but I'm going to stay in my lane in terms of what I know. So, I've worked with people for the last 9 years in the age range from 15 to about 85 or so. And I can tell you there's an enormous difference in when someone is exposed to what they call supranormal stimulus, which is an example of that would be something like that sex education that Brad was talking about, or hardcore pornography. If a guy is 50 as opposed to 25, the 25-year-old, the 50-year-old has not been exposed to that, and the depth of his addiction is not as severe, even if his behavior is more severe. So, and I really want to talk about that because from my perspective, there is a tsunami coming in terms of how this hypersexualized culture is going to affect our society. So, and the last thing I want to say that's really, really important is that people need to understand that the teenage brain is the most susceptible to this kind of, to supranormal stimulus, because 19 years old is when a boy or a man has the highest level of testosterone. Their brain isn't finished forming until you're 25. The part that is the last to form is called the prefrontal cortex, which is the part of your brain that allows you to this is the front of your brain that allows you to basically make healthy and rational decisions. So what you have is a group of people, teenagers, who have a demand for dopamine, which is high risk behavior. They have a high level of testosterone, and they do not have the brain function yet to discern what is right and wrong for them. So exposing anyone to supranormal stimulus below the age of 25, really, but I mean, if you're going to say in school below the age of 18, is absolutely and utterly irresponsible. And I just want to say, from my perspective, I've had people with over 300 extramarital partners who are 50. Their addiction is easier to cure than a guy who's 25 who was exposed to internet pornography and never even had actual intercourse. But their brain has been bombarded by this kind of stimulus since they were 12, because their brain just isn't ready to handle it, and they're actually harder to cure.
So, one of the ways, Mark, one of my guests explained this, who was a physician or a psychiatrist, I don't remember both, is that with pornography and drugs, one thing they have in common is they literally rewire the brain.
Yes.
They rewire it. So that what happens, folks, is their whole thinking becomes contorted and to the point that they can't think straight any longer, and they're addicted to the point, just like somebody has to have a cup of coffee, or somebody has to have that heroin shot, they have to have their porn. And then what that sets them up for is pornography is all dealing with fantasy, they're so addicted to fantasy, they can't deal with real life any longer, or real life people, i.e. partners and spouses.
Absolutely. I mean, the effects of pornography on a relationship, there's a great website people can go to called yourbrainonporn.com, but it's non-faith-based. It just gives you all the research about what actually pornography does. But I mean, I haven't seen what Brad's talking about, and I want to cautiously, with my wife, probably watch the movie that he put together. But from what he's saying, and this is what I want people to hear, I mean, am I in favor of educating our children on healthy sexuality? Of course I am. You know, they
Yes.
need that. But what Brad is talking about is porn. And that's what we need to really hear. So what Brad is saying is that our schools are now introducing pornography to children as young as, from what I'm hearing, age 12.
No. It's as young as 5.
5. Wow.
Yeah, 5 is when they talk about playing with their body parts. They have diagrams and pictures of little boy and little girl playing with their body parts. And then they also talk about gender identity issues, where they bring they tell the children, you can be a boy on the outside, but be a girl on the inside. And you may change to become actually be a girl later on. And they teach us at kindergarten. We had a case where a girl went home. She started just crying and crying. Mom said, what's going on? She said, well, at school in kindergarten, we learned that I could actually be a boy on the inside, and I don't want to be a boy. That is a classic. Another one is in elementary school. Before puberty, they're learning about abstinence. This is what they mean: safe sexual activities that don't get people pregnant. So they teach them specifically how to have safe oral anal sex. Safe oral anal sex. I mean, just visualizing is foreign in concept.
What age group again, Brad? What
This
age
is like
group?
third grade, 4th grade. This is in the incremental. It's a whole program. So they start at kindergarten. Then the 1st grade, they have something else they do. Then and they build it up and they build it up and they build it up, grade by grade by grade. So that basically, by the end of by kindergarten through 12th grade, you have a complete indoctrination, a complete twisting of their minds. The only moral question, by the way, and I think Mark, I'd like to get his thoughts on this. The only moral question is simply, was it consensual? Because, and you consent when you feel you're ready. So if you feel you're ready for it, then that's fine. But you need to consent. If you don't feel you're ready, then don't consent. That's the only barrier. It's not if this is right or wrong. If you think if this, even your faith, your beliefs, or anything. So it totally opens the door for an amoral philosophy at a very young age. And frankly, I think it's very hard to have a child raised and maintain a biblical worldview, or a strong religious worldview perspective by the time they finish high school. I think it's almost impossible. I've heard the phrase spiritual genocide is what effectively public schools, government schools are becoming. And this curriculum, by the way, isn't just California. 17 other major school districts across the country have now adopted this, including Austin, Texas, and Fort Worth, Texas.
Wow.
Brad, I have a question, because I heard this as third party, so I don't know if this is true or not, but somebody told me that it's difficult for parents to opt their children out of this education. Is that true?
Yeah, it is true. We have opt-out forms customized for all 50 states, and they can download those for free on our website.
Okay.
But the opt-out forms in California are limited just to the sex education, birds and bees. It's statutorily, the liberals have made the California Health Youth Act totally make it so that all the real radical stuff about sexuality and sexual identity, that's all exclusive. You can't opt out of that. The most dangerous part of the whole stuff, the curriculum, down at kindergarten level, parents cannot opt out. That's why they need to be pulling their kids now, working with their local church or synagogue, start these homeschool co-ops, do what they can if they can't do a private school, because we are going, the ramifications are huge. And then you mentioned, by the way, Mark, as far as like at 18, 19, I'd like you to comment, if you don't mind, about what effect does this have on a kindergarten, 1st grade, 2nd grade child, 3rd grade, are they more immune because they haven't started through puberty? Or in fact, does this have an even more dire result?
More dire. The younger a person is introduced to what is not normal for them. So if we just look at the way the human body develops, what is it, 12, 13, 14, when the body begins to develop sexual characteristics. So the younger a child is introduced to sexuality in that kind of form, the more damage it does.
Wow. Okay.
So, bottom line here. So Stephanie, Brad, you answered. I'm going to have you reiterate it. Stephanie had a question. What options do parents have to opt their kids out of these awful sex ed programs? You have a resource, at least they can opt out a part of it. Where's the resource again?
Yeah, the resources are the opt-out forms. We also have a parents' rights material. We also have 12 steps to protect your children from being taken by social workers, and parents' rights in public schools. That's all at pji.org, P for Pacific, J for Justice, I for Institute.org, pji.org. We do all of our work without charge, all of our counsel, representation, all without charge. So we encourage people to contact us if they need help and have any issues with their school district. We've sued a lot of school districts. We know what we're doing in that regard, and we'd be happy to go to bat for parents and let them know what their rights are. So thank you.
All right. So we had another question, Tammy from YouTube. And Elrod, see if you know the answer to this, because I don't specifically. What is the name of the local parent group working for school choice in Santa Barbara? I'm not sure if this is Barbara Battistini's group or not. Do you know what that question's referencing?
I'm not completely sure. I know that there is a group of conservative parents here in Santa Barbara that are, fighting on a lot of fronts, and they would be called Fair Education. Is a group.
Okay, that's James Fechner.
Yeah.
Yeah, Fair Ed.
James,
and that had to do with this other subject. And before we go, folks, if you're on Facebook, you can go to comments. If you're on YouTube, you can go to chat. We'd love to hear from you. How many of you support or oppose graphic sex education for second grade students? And I'm going to just share this story. Brad and Mark, you can all appreciate this. And Elrod, you're the youngest one here. Normally, boys that, and this was a huge problem for me. Usually boys that are 5, 6, 7 years old say, I like boys, I hate girls. I like boys, I hate girls. I cannot even begin to fathom when they feel like they like boys and they hate girls, somebody saying, well, maybe you're gay. Introducing that into their lives when it's a social thing, not a sexual thing. And this is my biggest problem with society. They have sexualized absolutely everything. And of course, this last week, we had this horrid bill that will allow a 24-year-old man to have sex with a 14-year-old boy and not be automatically registered as a sex offender. So I want to go back to Elrod. Elrod, you're muted again. I want to talk to you about another area of curriculum that we referenced earlier. And this is, instead of teaching kids and inspiring kids that no matter how you started off in life, you can make something of yourself, they are instead instilling victim status and basically a faith that all what they'll ever witness in America is oppression. And you are the antithesis of that paradigm. And I would love for you to just talk about what you would like to do and what the school should be doing, in your opinion, if you're elected to the school board.
Okay. Yeah. So we definitely all want, families to homeschool their kids and if they can find ways to remediate the damage that's being done in the public school system. And even I would say a lot of this is starting to creep into private schools as well. But
Yes.
unfortunately, for a lot of families, they're, for whatever reason, they have to send their kids to public school. And what's now a law here in the state of California is ethnic studies. And our current district has adopted this ethnic studies curriculum with no parental or really community involvement. What happened was we had a BLM protest a few months ago, and the school board welcomed them into the school and said, you know, we're going to hear your demands. They made their list of 7 demands. The school board accepted it in its entirety and then created a ethnic studies curriculum, mostly based off those demands, and welcomed the BLM ideology. Now, I don't know if a lot of people know the real intent of Black Lives Matter or not, but I would definitely recommend going to their website. I would even, if you really want to dig deeper, go to the Internet Archives, at the history of their website, and you'll see all the things that they've been fighting for. So some of the things that they state on their website, BLM, is that they're for a Black separate community. So they want Black autonomy. That is very racist to say, you know, we want to separate ourselves outside of everyone else. I mean, when, for example, when a white group says this, they're considered, you know, a hate group and, you know, homegrown terrorists, and there's all kinds of other things, white supremacists. So somehow BLM gets the green light and the wink and the nod to say these things, when actually they're akin to other hate groups who say the same thing. And actually, per the Ed Code, that's illegal to promote a group that discriminates against some other group based on gender, sexual identity, or ethnicity. So they adopted this curriculum that says, yeah, you know, we want to just be divisive. We are saying that you are oppressed. And also we are saying that in order to, you know, be unoppressed, you have to destroy the institution in the system. And they educate the children on how to protest, how to, you know, fight the system per se. And going back to my own story, that's so not true. My family, as you talked about earlier, Andy, you know, we were on welfare, a whole host of different things and government support, but we got together and we came to the agreement that this was really negative for us and our family. And to better ourselves, we decided, you know what, we're all gonna, there was a bunch of us. So we could do, what we did is everyone who was able to work got a job. You know, we didn't have internet, or, you know, most people didn't have phones or things like that. And we were very frugal from the onset, and we gradually were able to cut off basically the government teat per se, and become responsible citizens of this economy in our state. And so now everyone that got jobs, you know, we've graduated, went to various colleges or trade schools and things, and we're able to succeed in life because we had that individual personal responsibility. And within ourselves, we're like, you know what, this is not good. This is unhealthy. We need to be able to provide for ourselves and our future families as well. And that kind of individual responsibility is not being taught. This is why we have, you know, young people out protesting, because they're taught these things, that you're oppressed. They're taught that, you know, you need to destroy the system. The system is systemically racist. When in all honesty, I will say this, being a minority, there are so many programs out there that are specifically designed to help minority people. And being a minority, I have only had great experiences. In a sense, the red carpet gets rolled out for you if you want to go to do various things and take, you know, life by the horns. So I've been able to go to UCLA and graduate with a degree in biology and work here in the county as a health inspector and do fairly well, because I understood the important fact that I myself have to work, and America is that place to do that. And in that ethnic studies curriculum, they're not doing that. And I would largely say a lot of people who kind of are trying to not, who are trying to keep this curriculum in place, they say, oh, you're against ethnic studies. No, I'm all for ethnic studies. Let's talk about how great America is and how we are a multicultural society. Let's talk about that. You know, a lot of different races and ethnicities have come here to America and have really benefited this country. We don't talk about that. We just are negatively saying these people hate these people and it's terrible. That in a sense is damaging to the children.
I want to tell you a little bit about my story because it kind of ties into a lot of this stuff. My dad died when I was 9. My mom was immigrant and she didn't have a heck of a lot of job skills. And so we would have been on welfare, except that we got Social Security, and my dad plus had a small pension because he was a career veteran in the Air Force. And then plus I started working when I was 9 years old for my own money. I bought my own bicycle, my own stereo, motorcycle, car, even bought my mom a dryer and stuff like that. So I made pretty good money because I had 2 paper routes as a kid and two jobs in high school. And anyway, but because we were poor, the first job I got was the equivalent of Equal Opportunity Commission or whatever they called it back in the 70s. I worked at the public library and the library got paid to hire me. And then I got into UC San Diego as an equal opportunity placement. Even though I'm lily white, I was an EOP student. But that has its drawbacks. Now, I was a A- B+ student at Lompoc High, and I ended up being a solid B+ student at UCSD. But I had to work my butt off to do that because UCSD, it was primarily known as a science college. It was one of the top 10 pre-med schools in America. All of the students there had 4.0 sky-high SAT classes. They were the top 1% of the graduates. I was not top 101% of the graduates. So let me set this up for you. So I'm an EOP student, and so are my roommates. One of them's Black and one of them's Hispanic. We struggled. And what I'm talking about here is that, and I've done a bunch of shows with it on this, including with a member of the Civil Rights Commission, United States Civil Rights Commission. When you lower the standard for entrance to a white guy, a Hispanic guy, a Black guy, or an Asian person, you lower the standard for them to get in based on race or finances, that doesn't help them compete. You end up setting them up for potential failure. So my Black roommate ended up dropping out altogether. I lost contact with him. My Hispanic roommate was going to be a doctor. He couldn't get in. And again, he was smart, but he couldn't get into any American medical schools because his grade point average was lower than all those other brainiacs at our school. He ended up having to go to Mexico to go to med school. Well, then they made it harder for him to pass the licensing exam here. It took him decades. Before, it was licensed doctor in Mexico, but before he finally got to practice, it took decades. So here on this ballot, we have Prop 16. Prop 16 is going to bring back 209. Prop 209 is going to set kids up for failure. So it will be legal to discriminate primarily against whites and Asians. And even though Asians are technically a minority, they don't get the protection of Prop 16. They didn't get the protection of 209. But it will allow Hispanics and Blacks primarily to get into institutions that they otherwise wouldn't get into. And that, like I said, ends up setting them up for failure. So we've got all sorts of problems here in California. We are advocating for school choice. Some folks, if you can't afford one parent to stay home with your kids, which of course distance learning is requiring that right now anyway, some people have created pods where, 10 kids in the neighborhood or 10 families in the neighborhood or in their social circle share an expense to get a tutor, and then they tutor those kids all day long. There's homeschooling groups. There's charter schools, but as Brad Dacus said, Newsom put a freeze on those. I'm for vouchers. I want I want parents to be able to take that money and either homeschool, charter school, private school, or a pod or what have you, and because what we're doing is not working. And I want to say that there's a question here. Joni wants to know whether this will be archived soon. It will probably be up by this afternoon for people to share. Brad, I know that you and Mark have a big followings. You can share this. And Elrod, we want to get you elected in Santa Barbara. And Elrod, I want to bring up one more point. That is that a lot of parents showed up. They showed up for the just cause bias training or just communities bias training. They showed up for the pornographic sex ed. Literally, I think last week, 100 people showed up. Board blew them off. They didn't care. Your comments on that?
Well, a few things about that. Yeah, it was basically speaking to a wall. If you watch the Zoom video, the board members were just kind of rolling their eyes, looking around, not even engaging with any of the parents and what they were saying. And all of those people who were talking were super passionate, very upset. And it goes back to what I'm running on is that parental engagement, because parents are the ones who want what's best for their children more than anybody else. And the parents were, it was very interesting. And what happened was we had, in the beginning of this year, it's been going on for about 8 or 9 months, this whole sex ed saga. And in the beginning of the year before COVID, actually, we had even more parents show up for a meeting in March. It was about 300 parents showed up to a school board meeting to, protest the adoption of the Teen Talk curriculum, which is what they call their radical sex ed curriculum. And then, pandemic, Zoom, everything's put on hold. So fast forward to last week, the board just passed it. And what happened was, another thing is the Democratic Central Committee specifically asked their candidates seeking endorsement, do you support this Teen Talk curriculum? Do you support Just Communities? And do you support a required ethnic studies curriculum, or the ethnic studies curriculum that they had adopted? So in order to get that endorsement, because all the incumbents, all 3 of them, are seeking re-election, they all said, yes, we are going to support the Teen Talk, the Just Communities, and the required ethnic studies curriculum that we've passed. So it was a complete political maneuver. And not one ear was listening to the parents on that board. And I brought it up in that discussion. I said, clearly you're requiring these board members to agree with this Democratic Party platform stance, and they're going to do it because they need that endorsement and they want to stay on this board. And even the chair for the Democratic Committee, Gail Teaton-Landis, called in and said a lot of different things. So it's become very politicized, and it's become very clear that what is going on is an ideological indoctrination that is completely maligning the parents and the community and what they really want. So that's why I'm running to stop that. For those parents and families who can't homeschool or go to a private school, because otherwise they're just, meat and fodder for the wolves.
Andy,
Well,
can I
thank you for
jump in
that.
here quickly?
Sure.
I'm still stuck on what Brad said. So, I end up kind of picking up the wounded. I had no idea that we were setting our children up in this way, indoctrinating them basically for porn addictions. What we're doing, we're grooming them. I'm a mandatory reporter. So one of those things I have to report on, I have to report to the state, is if someone is exposing, not touching, but exposing a child to pornography. So from what Brad said, our education system is abusing our children by exposing them to porn, and honestly should be reported. Seriously.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, no, I don't mean to laugh. It's so painful that if you don't laugh, you're going to cry. It's absolutely true. It is, and I hate to say this, they don't know how to spell banana, but they know how to put a condom on one. That's the status of our education system. Mark, I want to ask you a question. We're going to have to wrap up here pretty soon, but I want to ask you a question. How is a parent, what are the telltale signs? How can a parent know that their kid's doing porn? Is there any way for them? Because I know that people can put filters on computers and this, that, and the other, but sometimes where there's a will, there's a way. Is there signs or is it just that they have to be able to talk to those kids? What should parents do, especially when the schools are working against them?
Yeah, there's an organization called Media Savvy Moms, and they are the real experts on this. And I would really encourage people to go there. I have seen the following symptoms. One is social isolation, and the other one is irritability. So, I have parents laugh at me and saying, well, all teens are irritable. But the thing is, when you're getting that level of high from internet porn, everything else becomes boring. Everything else becomes boring. Talking to your dad becomes boring. Going skateboarding becomes boring. Everything becomes boring because this is such an intense high.
All right. I'm going to go back to COVID right now and something that Brad mentioned in passing. I've done probably 200 shows on COVID, talking to all sorts of people from think tanks, doctors, lawyers, psychiatrists, everything. And the one thing that came out, the best way that somebody said it is what we have in our society right now is single objective function bias. Folks, if you got cancer, you're not going to go to the hospital, get it removed because we're saving that room for COVID. If your loved one is dying in a nursing home and one of the things they're dying from is loneliness and depression, they're dying, but you can't visit them because they may catch COVID. It's single function objective bias. So domestic violence, depression, alcoholism, drug abuse, all of these other things, and death by comorbidities are skyrocketing. One doctor told me 80,000 cancer diagnoses have been missed because people didn't go to see their doctor. 34,000 people have died from cancer that it may have been prevented or at least prolonged their life had they gotten routine on-time treatment. And that's just one issue, i.e. skin cancer and things like that. And what we're doing here, the way a guy, I think it was in a Wall Street Journal article this week, said, we have to make a choice. Are we going to live with COVID or are we going to live for it? And it's the same thing as dying with COVID versus dying from it. Our society is dying with it. We're not going to school. We're not going to counseling. Kids are not socializing. Old people don't get to hug that baby. You can't go to a funeral. You can't go to a wedding. You can't go to school. We are letting this thing completely dominate our lives when the fatality rate is 0.5% and 40% of that is elderly people with severe comorbidities. We've blown this thing out of proportion and it's decimating lives. And we've talked about this before, Brad, you and I and others. That kid only has one chance for 4th grade or 6th grade or 8th grade. They only had one chance for a graduation ceremony. We're robbing them of education, socialization, and a whole lot of other things, meaningful interaction with one another. And in the meantime, we're corrupting them physically, sexually, and psychologically. This thing is a huge mess. I want to see this fixed. And my bottom line is I don't like monopolies. I don't like private sector monopolies, and I don't like public sector. The public sector is the worst. And what we had here is we've got the unions and school districts and politicians forcing these schools to be closed while making provision for their own children, and also having a standard that's based on socioeconomic status, where upwards of 20% of the poorest kids in the state are being left out and left behind. I'm going to let each one of you do a closing statement, anything you want that we've talked about. And we will have this on Facebook Live and YouTube, and our Facebook page, YouTube. We have our own YouTube channel. We'll have it available all over the place. You can go to andycaldwell2020.com and you'll find it there, or a link to it. Brad, do you want a closing statement?
Oh, certainly. I'll make it short. We at the Pacific Justice Institute are here to serve everyone listening to this, defending parents' rights, religious freedom, the sanctity of life. And once again, we have great resources for parents to opt out, as well as the documentary we just released. They can watch it free of charge. It's called Sex Ed, Let Parents Decide. They can find that on our website, pji.org. And I want to thank the work of Mark and what he's doing. That's parents need to wake up. And then Elrod, hats off to you. I appreciate what you're doing and what you're undertaking, and wish you all the best in having a real true representative parents there at the school board meetings. And finally, I just want to say, folks, this is the time for us to register to vote and to vote, but also to make sure your churches out there or synagogues have voter registration and are registering every single person there attending, so they can be responsible. We have a full-time pastor liaison, Peter Moore, on staff that will work with your church or synagogue and help them to easily and legally register their members to vote. This is about compassion. This is about love. It's not about politics. It's about doing what's right. And the stakes are simply too high. We need to also get behind, Andy didn't say this, but I'm going to ask me this, but I'm going to say it. We need to get behind Andy Caldwell and people like him and people like Elrod, who are there to make a real difference. The stakes are simply too high for our kids. Once again, for information on any of what I said, go to pji.org and let's run the race.
Thank you, Brad. You've been in the trenches. My family supports Brad Dacus's work. It's priceless work, and thank you for what you've been doing year after year.
Thank you.
Mark, last words.
Yeah, I want to echo what Brad says. I think it's time to stand up, because I think what I want people to hear is the devastation of sexualizing our children lasts for decades, literally for decades. So we have to stand up and protect them.
Thank you for the work you do. And again, how do people get a hold of you if they've need some help?
Resolvetherapy.org.
And again, you're in 5 cities.
Yes.
Elrod.
I would just start by saying, we are here in this position today from people not taking action to vote and just letting things slide. I have talked in this election to a lot of churches, a lot of conservative people, and just the urgency is not there. And I will say, if what's going on is not egregious enough to vote, I shudder to think what tomorrow and in a few years is going to be like if we don't stand up today, if we don't stop now. I mean, just for Santa Barbara district, the literacy rates, about 45%, only 45% of the children in our district can actually computate effectively, and that basically 50% are able to read proficiently. So we're not teaching the children how to read. We're destroying their minds. We're destroying their ability to have a career. And we're not allowing parents to take that responsibility that is theirs to train their children. And that's why I'm running. And I just echo what Brad said. If anyone cares about their children or about our community, get out there and vote. If you haven't registered, do that. If you want to learn more about my campaign, it's learn learnwithmcclern.com. That's learnwithmcclern.com. There's, yeah, you can read more about me and my bio and what's going on here in the district. And thank you, Andy, for having me on as well. You're also one of those candidates that need to get elected. So I urge people to vote. Visit my website, Learn with McClern, to find out more.
Great. Well, I want to thank all three of you for being with us. I've had all of you on the show. Brad for more than a decade, Mark several times, and folks, we are, the way I explain what we're talking about here in the greater context, it's an attack upon and the undermining of Western civilization and our Judeo-Christian values. They literally are tearing apart the fabric of our society. The fabric for family formation, the fabric for e pluribus unum, and the melting pot, all of the above, all of it is absolutely, completely, and totally destructive of everything that made America great. And what made America great is what made America good, to borrow from de Tocqueville. I want to close with just a couple of things here. First off, we have a campaign website. It's andycaldwell2020.com. We have a lot of things on that website. In fact, we are soon going to have one of these guides to help parents block internet porn sites from their family and children's computers and devices. But we also have a YouTube channel link up at the top right-hand side, a Facebook link up at the top right-hand side. I will be debating Salud Carvajal at least once on October 17th at 4 p.m. on KEYT's cable channel. It will be live streamed, and then they're going to put it on their network stations, I think, at a later date. We also have a track your ballot tool. Folks, do not mail your ballot in. Do not mail it in. You drop it off at a polling place or drop it off at the county clerk recorder's office, or if people follow Brad's suggestions, churches will have a ballot harvest Sunday where you can drop your ballot off with your church pastors and elders, and they will bring it to San Luis Obispo, Ventura, Santa Barbara County clerk recorder's office. So if you do mail it, you better check it that it got in. We will have a track your ballot tool that shows it got confirmed. But know this, be forewarned. In some states and jurisdictions, up to 20% of the ballots mailed in are rejected because the people filled them out wrong. They filled them out inefficiently. For instance, my legal name is James Andrew Caldwell. If I sign that ballot, Andy Caldwell, it doesn't count. And they may try to give you a chance to cure it, but there's no guarantee. Upwards of 20% can end up being rejected, especially if for people that are new to vote by mail. Everybody is vote by mail this year. You're going to get your ballot the first week of October. Everybody needs to be watching their mail. If you don't get that ballot the first week of October, you call your county clerk recorder's office and tell them, I did not get my ballot, because that's how they're being sent out. So I want to thank everybody for being here. And again, we will post this. This thing will probably be posted by this afternoon, so you can share it. And again, Brad, Mark, and Elrod, thank you so much for being with us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Andy.
Take care. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day, and I hope to see you soon.
See you.
All right.